Their work will be remembered as one of the greatest moments of this planet.
Mr. Scout. I know you're still weighing whether to return to Lumen. But the mark I've come to know is happy.
Hello, is anyone there? Is the board on? It's Marquez from Macro...
What you all did was one of the most painful moments in the history of this company.
What the hell?
But the four of you have become known as the face of Severance reform.
Okay, so we're not in trouble?
I don't think so. Milchick said we're famous.
All of us equally, or one of us is like the star?
Now if you feel that you can't go on.
So what the hell did you guys see up there?
It's not our world up there.
And your life is filled with much confusion.
My Audi's wife died a few years ago. Except the woman is Miss Casey.
So what are you gonna do?
I gotta get her out of here.
Mark, your Annie said she's alive.
This is obscene.
I just want to be sure.
And your world around is coming down.
Why did you do this? What is this all about?
Do you know something about Gemma?
Mark, there'll be no honeymoon ending for you.
Their work will be remembered as one of the greatest moments of this planet.
You don't value them. You fear them. We fear no one.
I'm tightening the leash.
If we let this happen to Miss Casey, who's gonna step up when it happens to us?
Now. Goodbye, Marquez.
Wait!
My name is Miss Huang. It's my first day here as deputy manager. Mark W.
Why are you a child?
Because of when I was born.
And welcome welcome all to another Severance Tuesday on this fine evening. And tonight, we of course are going to be diving into all things Severance, taking a look back at the previous episode 6 entitled Attila and all of the interesting scenes that we had therein. And of course, also taking a look ahead at episode 7. The upcoming episode entitled Chikai Bardo, which the title alone has so many connotations and so many parallels with Severance when you dive into what Bardo is, and in particular the 6 stages of Bardo, which we will discuss a little bit about that this evening as well. But welcome everybody. Here we are. Severance is continuing full steam ahead. Episode 6 is in the books. We look ahead to episode 7. And we are officially in the back half of season 2. Season 2 is only got 4 episodes left. It's hard to believe that it's already been 6 episodes, only 4 remaining. But I get the feeling these final 4 are going to continue to ramp things up as we get closer and closer to finally finding out just what exactly is Cold Harbor. But welcome one, welcome all. Ravener, welcome my friend. Are you ready to dive into some Severance with our awesome Sebbies?
I really am. Yeah, man. I kind of dug this episode. There were things that hit, things that didn't, and I'll always be straight with you guys. What didn't scratch the itch for me, or what kind of landed flat. But I kind of liked it. And if season 1 was any indication, they stuck the landing with episode 10 of season 1, and I fully my enthusiasm, my trust in the steering the ship towards the to the season finale. I have a lot of faith in them still. I absolutely, so yeah, I mean, it seemed like not a lot happened in this episode, but a lot did kind of. And what I liked really on this one, probably more than most of the other episodes that I can think of. Or the one thing that stuck out to me is how they were introducing. They really do it in a subtle way. They introduce different themes or different aspects of it. This time, they introduced, religion. And I kind of when Bert and Irving and Fields were having their discussion, and it kind of interested me because I know, like, if Severance were a real thing, these kind of ethical, moral, and
these
even religious, they would have to be hashed out. And this one, but they don't really beat you over the head with it. It's not really ham-fisted, and I've seen it in way too many shows with less skillful writers where they don't use subtlety. They just really just bang you over the head with it, and they create a caricature or almost insult you with the characters that they make. This one, they just kind of said, hey, we went to a Lutheran church and the pastor and was talking about Severance, which is something that would happen if Severance became a real thing. Different churches would have to have different policies. They would have to formulate their policies to answer the questions that their parishioners would have. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's kind of, that was, very realistic,
Makes sense.
Yeah. And they also introduced a lot of different things here. We got a second instance now. And I also like how they do this. They'll introduce something like the Helena, how wrong it was of Helena to deceive everybody. And, Mark kind of got stuck in that situation. Well, now Dylan is doing the same thing with his Audie's wife. And so they'll present almost a similar quandary, but they'll kind of switch it a little bit. So now you have to reassess. If you're going to judge the first person harshly, you have to hold the other person to the same standard, or else maybe you have to dial back the judgment. And I saw that in this episode. People were like, "Oh my God, Mark is so mean. Oh, he's being so mean to her." Blah blah. Well, guess what? What did Helly do?
And I'm one of them. I'll admit it. I thought Mark was a bit of a dick. I don't think he handled it the best way, but he did redeem himself in this episode, in my opinion.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, man, when you get a huge dump of emotional crap on you, everybody deals with it in their own way. And his way was, look, I don't want to sit here and hang around at this funeral or whatever. I just want to focus on my work, so I'm not dealing with people. And the worst thing is when people come up and say, bug you about, hey, dude, are you okay? Are you okay? Like, fuck, leave me alone. Yes, I'm fine. Leave me alone. I'm working through this. But he worked through it in his way, which was to focus on work. Well, I guess if he could take his shoes off and curl up in the corner and cry, I guess he could have done that. That's what Helly did. But the thing is, they both came back from it. When Helly needed him, he was already essentially back to being able to reach. Sometimes you just have to protect yourself and sort things out for yourself before you extend yourself out to others. And maybe you're not the best shoulder to cry on in those situations and stuff. But that's part of being a person. You can be selfish when you're a person.
No, and you can. Everybody has the right to be. But my kind of problem with it was, it wasn't so much that Helly was looking for a shoulder to cry on. She just wanted the truth. She just wanted to know what happened, and he wouldn't even give her that. So that was kind of my problem with Mark in the previous episode. He has every right to kind of process his grief in any way that he wants. Every human processes grief in a different way, and especially someone like an Innie who doesn't have that life experience to kind of have the tools to deal with these kinds of things. He's essentially still 2 years old. So I totally get him kind of, wanting to shut down and wanting to kind of just deal with it himself. That was my only problem, was just tell her what happened. At least tell her what happened. But again, I do think he redeemed himself in this episode with coming right off the bat, coming clean with her at the very beginning of the episode. And like you said, we saw how Helly dealt with it as well. She shut down for a little bit too. We see her, like you said, in the hallway, kind of curled up in the fetal position as she's kind of trying to process what happened to her. And then she quickly kind of regains herself, and kind of we see that old Helly again. And that was, I was grateful to see that too, because it's hard to realize, like when you go back and look at the first half of the season, it's like, shit, we haven't seen Helly at all this season. Like Helena did do a decent job at times playing Helly. I know a lot of fans picked up on it early, but looking back now, we didn't see Helly at all in season 2. And then when I look ahead to the whole Chikai Bardo thing and how the death and rebirth is going to be apparently a central part of this next week's episode, Helly kind of goes through a little bit of a rebirth herself when Irving does bring her back, and it's like, okay, we finally have Helly back. But even though Irving brings Helly back in episode 4, I feel like the real Helly didn't come back until this episode, when she does finally hear about what happened, and she does finally process that grief. And then she gets up and she goes and finds Mark and says, no, I don't want her memory. I want to create my own. I feel like that was the point we really got Helly back.
Yeah, and it's funny that both the innie and the outie, I mean, I wonder how much those two bleed together, even though they're supposed to be separate. Because, Helly is assertive. Helly is,
exactly.
She says what she wants and says what she means. She doesn't really prevaricate or kind of like dance around it. And I did think it was weird that she wanted to replicate it in a tent, but you know what? Again, different strokes for different folks, I guess. If you got a tent fetish, you do you. Live your best tented life.
I called it the indoor office Ortbo. Mark and Helena had the outdoor Ortbo. Mark and Helly now have the indoor Ortbo, the makeshift tent in the office room, which was kind of sweet. It was kind of romantic, at least as romantic, I guess, as you can make an office building, an empty office room. I mean, there's only so many ways you can make that romantic, but I did like the tent idea. I guess it was a kind of a parallel to Mark and Helena. Although, yeah, I mean, it's interesting that she would even want a similar parallel, considering how much she doesn't like Helena. But yeah, it was an interesting choice to go with the little makeshift tent. I thought it was kind of cute, I guess. And it reminds me that they are still kind of growing into adolescent. The creator Dan Erickson often talks about season 1 being their childhood and season 2 being the innies growing into adolescence. And I feel like that was another kind of aspect or representation of their adolescent ways, where they have to kind of create the perfect little tent area for them to do this in. And I thought it was it was an interesting parallel to Mark's first time with Helena. But
and I thought it was good. We talked about in the last episode how because Milchick dumped that on Mark. You effed your like Helly's outie at the Ortbo, and we always forget, because it takes me a minute to realize and remember that these guys, their entire existence is on that floor. So when he was in the elevator and Milchick dumped that on him, he didn't have the whole night to process it and think how I'm going to handle this, whatever. He had a hot second before that door opened again, and it's 9 a.m. and he's got 8 hours of refining to do. The same thing for every other character. Their entire existence is only on that floor. They don't get that reprieve. They don't get that unwind, which I think would just be absolutely maddening. That would be like a hellish existence.
It is interesting. It is very interesting, to say the least. But yeah, it was good to see Mark and Helly kind of confront this thing that happened to both of them, because yes, Helly, Mark and Helly were both violated in a sense. This was something that happened to both of them, really. And in this episode, it feels like we finally see them confronting it and ultimately moving past it and kind of growing in a sense. And that was one of the themes we see throughout the episode, is not only the theme of the theme of relationships, which we see between Mark and Helly, we see between Dylan and his Audie's wife, we see between Bert and Irving, the theme, and Fields, the theme of relationships was in this episode. But the theme of growth was also in this episode as well, where we saw multiple episodes trying to facilitate their own version of personal growth, whether it's Helly trying to get over what happened to her and move past it and create her own memory going forward, whether it's Mark kind of, fessing up and being honest with her where he was a little nervous to at first, even to Milchick, where he is literally trying to grow in the mirror as he is faced with this bad performance review that really shook him to his core, to this point where he's literally standing in front of a mirror trying to deprogram the way he naturally speaks so he doesn't use big words. Like, we see a lot of characters going through growth this episode.
Yes, and I really like that scene. It showed it showed another layer of what was going on inside of Milchick. It's so cool. He took the criticism and immediately just basically blocked out his schedule so that he could go put papers together with paper clips. But he was more hurt by having to change, and I thought it was so cool because he's been kind of prodded in two different areas, once with the painting and then once with this evaluation, this negative evaluation. And the painting seemed to be irritating, kind of like made him question a little bit, but it seemed to me like being insulted by the painting, like his Black identity wasn't as strong as his self that uses the big words were more of a part of him, and having to undo that was more painful to him. I mean, you could see him almost crying. I really expected a tear to come out of his eye. And as he was looking in that mirror, they did it really skillfully. And I know you guys in the chat, I know you probably saw it too, Jeremy, how they cut off to the side, they cut his face off a little bit and then moved it back centered him. It's almost like he got severed, like the part of him
like
that was
severing a part of himself, like a part of himself that makes himself who he is, the way he expresses himself, his vocabulary, his improper use of paper clips. These are all part of what makes Milchick. And it's like he's trying to sever this part off of him, and it was tough for him, like you said. We see that one point where his hands are literally shaking because he is just so distraught at what he saw in this performance review. And he is essentially trying to sever a part of himself and kill off a part of himself and kind of be reborn into this new Milchick.
And that is like the criticism on his vocab. It's striking at his core, deeper than probably anything else that they've done. He's struggling with it, but I think he'll probably get through it. Now, I would be surprised, I mean, if he shows up and is like really using common language, essentially, like, colloquial, hey, what's up, MDR,
what's up,
all this stuff.
I don't. It's gonna be so out of place for someone like him. It's not gonna sound right.
So it'll be interesting to see how they play that. But this one, we knew that the story arc on Milchick, the path of him turning against Lumon, was going to take. It wasn't going to be one precipitous thing, and it wasn't going to be some trifling thing like just the painting. It was going to be a series of things. But this one might be the first domino. This one more so than. Probably more than the painting. I definitely think this was the first domino that might become something more. What it will become, that I can't really say. A few things didn't hit for me. I mean, I was, I'm not really putting a whole lot of what's the next episode title?
Chikai Bardo.
Bardo, See, they blew it. For me, they blew it. I don't care about Bardo, nothing. Because they fucked it up with Attila. We were thinking that it actually meant something.
And how they referenced Attila to the episode, and how it kind of was just a nickname, essentially.
Cutesy little pet name. I was like, okay, you can do it once, and you get that little finger wag. Oh, you got me. But not. It's like it's all the complexity of an April Fool's joke. It's like, oh my god, did you see something? Harrison Ford died? No, really? April Fool's. Oh yeah. So basically, you told a stupid lie with zero pay. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah, the Attila didn't go as deep as I had hoped, but I do have faith for the Chikai Bardo. Just based on the limited preview I've seen for episode 7, it looks like it's going to be heavily um, flashback episode where we're finally going to learn a little bit more about Mark and Gemma before the accident.
Ooh.
And Bardo, being the fourth of the 6 stages of Bardo, is basically the beginning of one's death cycle. And when you look at Gemma's storyline, that is essentially when her storyline started, the beginning of her death cycle, when she first has this car accident and she first gets taken by Lumen and reprogrammed or reborn into Miss Casey. So I think Chikai Bardo is going to have a much deeper meaning for next week's episode than Attila did for this one. I was a little disappointed it wasn't a little bit deeper. I was hoping for something a little bit deeper too, because I'm diving into all this Attila the Hun stuff, and it just turns out to be a nickname. So I definitely feel you there. It was a little underwhelming, but I do think Chikai Bardo is going to be. I think it's going to be a little bit deeper than Attila was, at least just referring to Gemma and her storyline, and hopefully maybe finally getting a little bit of the origin as to what really happened. What did Lumen really do? What hand did they play in the car accident? Was it just a fortuitous moment where they saw a car accident and had a chance to grab someone and fake their death? Or did they orchestrate the whole car accident themselves? I'm hoping we're going to get a little bit along the ways of an origin for Gemma turning into Miss Casey, but I do think that is what Chikai Bardo will be referring to, at least in next week's episode. Gemma's kind of death and rebirth as Miss Casey.
Okay. Yeah. Do you think they would go? Do you think they'd give us that much this early on?
The whole origin, maybe not. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Just kind of give
I
us an
only know
indication.
that I'm thinking they're going to give us something. If they're gearing up for it to be a heavy flashback episode, from what I hear it is, and just in the very small episode 7 preview, the only thing the episode 7 preview shows are Gemma and Mark scenes. That's the only scenes that are in the preview. It's all old Gemma and Mark scenes from before the accident. So we are at least going to be getting a few flashbacks. So I'm hoping we learn something. If they're gearing up for this, for these many, for this amount of flashbacks in one episode, I'm hoping they're going to give us something as to what really happened to Gemma. Maybe not the full story, but at least maybe the beginning of the breadcrumbs that will make it easier for us as fans to kind of theorize and follow what actually happened to her without actually having the full answer.
Okay, because they left a lot on the table at the at the end of this one. Mark having his little seizure. We had Drummond breaking in, so that and that kind of that's hanging up in the air too. Now, is Bert a villain? Is he sinister? Does he?
Yeah, Bert's on my sus list now. I guess I didn't have a chance to talk to you about this yet. We talked a little bit about it on Saturday, but I mean, what do you think? Do you think that Audi Bert? Maybe there's a little bit more there when we hear his husband Fields talk about him working for Lumen for 20 years.
Yes.
And then, of course, Irving points out that, slip of the tongue. And Irving points out that Severance has only been around for 12 years. And then we see right at the same time that he invites Irving over for dinner, we see Frolic breaking into Irving's house and looking at all of the intelligence he has uncovered. In the same episode where Bert also mentions Whole Mind, the anti-Severance group, the anti-Severance activist group that is against Severance, which I get the feeling they're probably a little bit more than just an activist group. I wouldn't be surprised if Irving is actually working with Whole Mind, and they found out about it, and they sent Bert in Irving's path to try and get some counterintelligence and find out exactly what Irving is doing, who he's working with. But what do you think about Bert? Is it just a coincidence? Was the 20-year Lumen thing a slip of the tongue? Was it a mistake? Was Frolic breaking into Irving's house at that exact moment of the dinner just a coincidence? Or was Lumen just surveilling his house and knew that was a good time to do it? What do you think about Bert after that episode? Is he on your sus list?
100% sus, man. I don't think that it was accidental. I don't think it was a mistake or coincidence.
Okay.
I think now the idea that the Whole Mind would send Irving down as a Sevi is one thing. To the idea that they would have Bert kind of like subtly, because I thought the optics and design thing was almost like by accident, like the interactions, they're at least like the discovery about optics and design. So I don't know, man. I don't know that they would. I mean, that is some 20D chess if they're putting putting a Sevi down to like divert Irving with a personal relationship, and then almost punishing Irving by withdrawing the relationship that he had. It threw Irving off of his game, and Irving was at that point a top performer, even if he wasn't, even if he was starting to get, he didn't start he was a true believer, man, as a Sevi.
He was
a company man through and through.
Absolutely.
So it really did nothing but divert him, kind of, unless Lumon was aware of all of this, aware of Irving being implanted there, and
they're tapping his phone calls when he's going to that phone booth. That's the only thing I can think of. This whole town that they're in is literally called the town of Kier. This is their town. This is Lumon's home base. If there's any kind of phone booth or anything that they have a capability of tapping, I would imagine it's this probably the last phone booth that's even around in the world at this point, because those things are all but non-existent. But we see Irving, us as the audience don't get the full brunt of his conversation. We never get to hear who he's talking to, but every time he's in that phone booth, we do always hear Irving talk about Lumon, talk about his innie this, his innie that. They fired my innie. I think they found out what he was up to. So whoever he's talking to, they're definitely at least giving us the sense that Irving was sent there to be a severed employee to gather intelligence or to maybe find this elevator.
Right. And that was, and the painting that he does, the painting that Audi Irving does was so strange. But I definitely we got all the indicators that Irving is at least in some way part of an anti-Lumon element. If it's, I mean, I'm not an expert on terrorist organizations or activist organizations or anything like that, but there's the more hands-on. I mean, it's like the CIA or something. There's agents that are more hands-on, and then they have analysts and other kind of administrative parts. I imagine any kind of group like that would be similar. I mean, you'll have the people that are going to lay down in the street to stop oil, and then you have people that work the phone banks, that kind of stuff. So it definitely seems like Irving is more of an agent.
He does, and I think John Turturro even gives it away a little bit in that one interview he did. It was an interview for episode 4, and it was he was stating, and we've talked about this in the past plenty of times, but Irving's innie attributes the way that he was able to uncover Helena, the reason why he was so suspicious of Helly was he couldn't get that night gardener statement out of his head. A gardener at night just didn't compute for him. He couldn't do it. He could not do it. He could not look past that. So it got to a point where he says innie Irving ultimately uncovering Helena was innie Irving tapping in to his Audi's training. Clearly,
right.
The indication that his Audi has some kind of training, be it again, could be military training. I saw someone saying in the chat that maybe Irving is working for the military and he's been sent in undercover to find out what Lumon is up to. That's also a very good possibility as well. He definitely does kind of carry himself like he could be ex-military, and we do know that his father did serve at one point. We saw all of his father's medals and everything inside of his home. His father was definitely a service member. So it's totally possible that Irving could be active or maybe ex-military, either still working for the government or ex-military that has been recruited by one of these groups to investigate Lumon.
Be a police detective or something. There's missing people and people that shouldn't be missing or people that should be dead that are around. So
that are on the severed floor. Like, I imagine a good enough investigator, when looking closer at Lumon, I imagine there's tons of irregularities at the very least for someone that would at least prompt someone into a deeper investigation. So yeah, what kind of training does Audi Irving have? What kind of training does he have that gives any Irving the instinct to kind of know Helly, something's up with Helly? And the creator Dan Erickson talked about something pretty interesting in terms of, is there a crossover? Is there a carryover? Do certain things transcend the severance barrier in terms of maybe the Audi feels so strongly about something or believes in something so wholeheartedly that even the innie is born with an innate kind of predisposition towards that? What exactly carries over? What does transcend the severance barrier? And while he said he does like to leave these details a little bit ambiguous, he also brought up the idea of Helena actually having real feelings for Mark, because Helly does, a kind of something that is transcending the severance barrier. So some things do cross over from Audi to Innie, even just on a subconscious level sometimes. And I think that's what we saw with Irving's Innie being like super secret agent in that episode. He was tapping into his Audi's training.
Oh, I mean, and we're seeing a lot of parallels with that. I mean, just the fact that Irving is gay and Bert is gay, both on the outside and inside.
Carries over, yeah. It
you know,
transcends the severance barrier. Yeah.
Right. And now I'm gonna wonder about I'm gonna go over to Miss Huang again with her thing and the Wintertide and the Fellowship. What did you make of that? Because that was another thing I want to care about it, but I don't. I don't think it's going to pay off. It felt like another proper noun.
Sure. I'm not sure. The only thing I could think of, and I got to give props to 2 p.m. for this, for reminding me, because I completely forgot about this, was maybe she went to the same school that young Cobell did. This is Miss Cobell when she was young, and we know she went to the Myrtle Eagan School for Girls. Is there a possibility that Minnie Milkshake, Miss Wong, is also an attendee of this school, and maybe her internship here is part of her final grade or something like that? That's kind of the only thing I was getting from it. And again, I got to credit PM for reminding me of this, because at first I wasn't sure how to make heads or tails of any of that, really. But then when I heard about this, when I remembered this, that's the only thing I could think of, that maybe Miss Wong went to the same Myrtle Eagan School for Girls as young Cobell did, and maybe her being here in this position right now is an internship of sorts. Because we do hear Milchick saying, "I'm the only one that can pass you through this fellowship."
Right. Okay. And one thing I liked about that scene, and it was real subtle. Again, they put it in. They bury it in the everything else, but when he was telling her, what was it? Focusing on your own duties. He was very explicit about focusing on your own duties, meaning keep your nose out of mine kind of thing.
Keep your nose out of my stuff and stop snitching on me for my improper use of paper clips.
That was
because that was totally Milchick. I mean, I feel like that scene, at least what I got from that scene, was him totally not so subtly letting her know that he knows it was her who led with these complaints. He knows.
Yes.
It's like, I know it was you. I know it was you.
And then followed up with,
childish folly.
Yes. Letting her know that he is her superior when she took a step to get behind the desk. We already know about how he is about his desk. M.R. space Milchick on the computer. And you can perform your duties at your own desk or whatever. It's like, oh, so she really got that wake up call. I mean, and again, kind of realistic in the world. You get these hard chargers, these young bucks that think that they're going to come in and shake up the world, or going to show the old guard how it's done and stuff. And sometimes they just need to be dialed back a peg. And she got that. She got a little serving of humble pie.
She did a little bit. It's it's a very interesting dynamic between those two characters. At first, it was hard to really make heads or tails of what their dynamic was, because we just didn't really spend enough time with them yet. But then I feel like the more we're getting to know Miss Huang, the more kind of devious and scandalous she's kind of proving herself to be. First off saying, you shouldn't allow them to have a funeral. It makes them feel like people. And then going and reporting on Milchick for using too many big words and improper use of paper clips. It's like she's slowly but surely starting to show herself to be a little bit devious.
Yeah, the office snake. I mean, hey, that people know that person too. The office snake. They'll be your buddy. Just so you tell them you can confide something to them, and then they use it to their
just
advantage.
So they can use it against you. Yeah, right? That is so her. I am so getting those kind of vibes from her now. That's a perfect way to describe it. Really,
yeah. And like Golden Child saying, maybe the feelings you hold deep in your heart transcend any of the brain severance procedures. That they really touch on that so much in these episodes. Is the person is the same, but the personality is different, and there are. I hate to I'm gonna relate this to a freaking Disney film. I think it's Disney. Remember Inside Out, how there's like core memories, and the one with all the personality traits and stuff, and the anger.
I don't think I've seen that.
Oh, the little red guy anger that blows up all the time, and then there's sadness. Oh, classic, man. Honestly, I like the original. The original is one of the all-time greats.
Okay,
definitely worth it. Yeah, Pam Jones loves Inside Out. but there are like core there's like it dealt with memory and personality and all the things that make up a personality, and they did it in a really cute way. But this one they're doing the same thing, and like Golden Child said, I think there are some things that go so deep. It's almost like when you talk about your brain, there's higher functions, there's motor functions, and then there's just that monkey brain, the lizard brain in the way back and bottom, where it controls instinct and like things that you can't really put your finger on, things that you can't consciously adjust or alter it. I mean, almost like your autonomic nervous system, where you're breathing and your blood pumping and everything else. You're not doing that with the conscious. And no matter how much you want to change it, you really it's way too deep. And I think we're seeing that almost on not quite that deep of a level, but we're definitely seeing personality traits or tendencies, call it what you will, the essence of personality. And again, man, they're bringing in ethical questions, they're bringing in moral questions, they're bringing in all these different, like, what makes up a personality, is it cheating, all this other stuff. And I think honestly, man, probably the biggest cheater in the show so far is Dylan's wife. Because the minute she lied, to him,
she did lie. Okay,
that lie is the first step. So, man. I mean, when I think about it, I think she's the first one to make a conscious and deliberate action. Maybe other than Helly. Helly was. I would say Helly was pretty wrong too, but she was kind of doing it. I mean, I don't know, man. Like cheating. I don't even want to get on a soapbox on that topic, but Helly was doing it, or Helena was doing it for her work or her job. I don't think that there were genuine feelings involved there, at least on the outset. Oh, you think they're at the beginning?
I do. I think from the very beginning, as soon as she saw Helly kiss Mark on that surveillance photo, she was envious and she wanted that kind of warmth for herself. And the creator does kind of say that she has been kind of envious for a genuine connection that she felt Mark and Helly shared.
Okay.
So I think there's been a genuine part of Helly wanting real human connection from the very beginning, just going about it in an incredibly selfish and twisted way because that's all she knows.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly not love, but I mean, I think I would have thought that Dylan and his wife had essentially what you would consider a real love relationship where you care about the other person. And the minute she's lying to him about, oh, well, I didn't go that second time, that was for me where she's making that decision. And whether they ever consummate it or ever do anything more after that, man, you get one shot, liars lie. If you're not a liar, then don't lie.
If you're not a liar, you never have anything to remember, is the old saying. That's the saying my father used to always say. If you never lie, you never have anything to remember. And it's just a good motto to live by. But yeah,
also,
I mean, like you said, she's already lying to her husband about even seeing him. She's clearly developing feelings for any Dylan, and you can understand why. In a sense, she sees any Dylan as the idealistic version of her husband. Of everything she wishes her Audi husband was, where Audi Dylan isn't everything any Dylan is. He does have some problems. He does have some bad judgment that he kind of puts on display from times. But at the end of the day, she's still lying to him too. So
and I kind of felt bad for. I mean, Zach Cherry, and I made fun of him early on just because of his appearance, but he did a good job. Yeah, he did a good job in this one because he's obviously on cloud 9 talking to his wife and talking about his Audi, and he almost, I mean, you could tell he is on his Audi's side. He's like, oh, so he's diverse. He's always casting everything in the most positive way. She's talking about, you had your scuba diving phase and your woodworking phase and your other phase, your garage beer phase, and he's like, so he's diverse, and and then he was like, maybe he just wants to find the thing that he's good at the way I'm good at this. So he kind of, I love how he's self-actualized, at least within, he knows he's good at his job because he's got the finger traps to prove it. He's got
all the perks. He loves his perks, Dylan. This is true. Dylan loves his perks.
And you saw him back off from telling, like when Helly and Mark were pressing Dylan for the information about the paper behind the poster. He was like, look, you don't understand everything. And I mean, I think he is very cognizant that they are going to use access to his Audi's wife as a wedge, and he's just not at that point. I mean, I think the feeling that he gets, that connection and that feeling that he gets with the wife is more than his friendship with either Helly or Mark. Mark and Helly feel like they're a team, and I think they're kind of like almost trauma bonded now because they both and I like how they've done that. They had a severe setback, and it looks like neither one of them are going to dangle it over the other one's head, the stuff that happened and all this other stuff. And they're still a team working against Lumon, trying to figure out this mystery. But I think Dylan's got an eye on the door, kind of. He's like not 100%. Let me put it that way. He might be 80% on board. He might be 60% on board, but he ain't 100% on board to the level that the other two are, I think. And it's 100% because of the perks. He likes that perk, man.
He doesn't want to lose this. He doesn't want to lose this time that he's gained with his Audi's family, to which he's already establishing a pretty deep connection with. I mean, you hear him, you see him. He's got the biggest smile on his face when he's talking to her. I just want to sit here and look at your face and hear about my offspring. Offspring, he says, which again, as PM pointed out to me, the way that Dylan describes it as offspring, the way that Mark describes sharing a vessel, I totally didn't put it together at first, but again, PM reminded me about Dr. Ricken's book and how it was left on the Severance floor, and I could totally see Ricken being the type to describe intercourse as sharing a vessel, to describe children as offspring. So I wouldn't be surprised if Dylan and Mark, they're getting all of these terms, offspring, sharing a vessel, they're getting it all right from that book. I mean, that is where they're learning about life from. And I didn't even put that together at first, but it is so fitting looking back in hindsight that of course Ricken would talk like that. Of course Ricken would say offspring. Of course he would say sharing a vessel. That is so Ricken.
It does. And probably more so than what you would find in the handbook, because the handbook essentially, I mean, it does act as a Bible, but it also does, or like, I don't know, Bible, like a holy document or whatever, but it's almost all corporate related type of stuff. I don't think they'd be talking about sharing vessels and stuff in your corporate manual.
Yeah. It sounds like that would be a Rickon thing coming right out of the You Are You book.
Yeah.
But yeah. But what do you guys think? Let us know. What do you think of episode 6 so far? What did you think of this episode? What were some of your favorite scenes in this episode? What were some of your least favorite scenes in this episode? Let us know what you guys are thinking as well. Faith and Repton says, I'm wondering if we are working on the same group of folders. I finished one and my internet lagged or something because when it went to the next file, it said done and sent me to another. I stopped on Minsk. Yeah, I don't know if it's randomized or if it's, I get the feeling it's randomized. I don't think that that we're all working on similar folders. If I had to guess, it was probably just a randomized kind of game. For anyone who doesn't know, Faith and Repentance is referring to this Lumon game. Lumon actually, for the show Severance, they actually put out a real game where you can go and refine the exact same way that MDR refines their numbers on the show. And this is what it looks like right here. It looks exactly like their screen. You get a case file. You get the case file name up in the corner. I am currently working on the case file Attila. And I am 38% complete with this one. I just started this one recently. And yeah, you can basically go and you can refine numbers, and you have to look out for the numbers that stand out, and then you just circle them. And then you fill up each one of the tempers by the time you're all done. It's an actual real game that you can really go and access, and you can play it on your phone, on your tablet. You can play it on desktop. And yeah, there's a legitimate game out there right now where people can go and refine these numbers. You just circle them like this. Oops, nope. No, I didn't circle enough. Damn it.
Yeah, I remember that when it first came out. Did they change it, or is it the same as it has been?
I think it's the same. I think it's but some people have been wondering in terms of the case files. Are we all working on the same case files? Are there different case files? I don't know. Part of me just always thought it was just randomized. And there we go, pulling up some more of our fourth temper.
Let me see which one I did. Yeah, I got to move into icons here.
Yeah. See if you pull the current one and see if it's Attila right now. And if anybody's working on a file right now, let us know the name of your file that you're currently working on. I am currently on Attila at 44% complete. And it's just a fun little way to pass some time, I guess. It's, again, you can play it on mobile, on desktop, on Androids, on tablets, pretty much anything, really.
Interesting. But, I remember when I think Kiwi Skirt was the first one to find it, the first one that I saw, and had posted in and because they time you too, so you can redo it and do it faster. But yeah, I'll have to go through and find. I think I posted it on Discord, but I'll have to go back in time and look it up. It's interesting. Yeah, it's a fun game, definitely to pass time. Have you gone through multiple case files then?
Yes, I've done. I think this will probably be my fourth. This will be my fourth file. I've done 3 before this. And thinking back, I should have kept track of the names of the first 3 that I did. I don't know the names of the first 3 files, but
okay.
I know they weren't all Attila.
Yeah, all I remember was it says congratulations, you completed X number, like 100 to 100% in X amount of time. But I can't remember the name. Shoot.
Yeah, it's hard to remember all the names. Yeah, there we go. I am refining away, ladies and gents. I am refining away. 46% complete now. Let's see. Where are we at? Refiners? But yeah, actual legitimate Severance game that anybody can go and play. It's free to play, and you don't have to download anything. It's not an app you have to download or anything like that. You just go and start refining. 49% complete. I'll finish that one later. But yeah, that's this is another thing I really like about Severance. They have really come out with a lot of extra content, extra material beyond just the episodes. Whether it's all the podcasts they do, the interviews they do, the little games, the actual Lumon website that they actually set up. They've set up tons of extra interactive ways that the fandom can interact with the show. And that's good to see when you see these shows kind of putting out extra content like this. Like, again, that game, it's super simple, but it's so fun. I could literally waste an hour playing that game and feel like 10 minutes have gone by. But yeah, let's get back to it.
Yeah, I saw a weird theory about all of that, about all the refining, like, and I know I'm going to botch it because I kind of just breezed over it, but essentially that they're almost like trying to reconstruct Miss Casey's personality.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
using those things, and that's why
Yep.
Mark has to be the one to do it.
That's exactly, yes,
okay,
and that's
using.
exactly what we talked about last week too.
Oh, okay.
That's why Mark specifically has to be the one to refine Cold Harbor, and why nobody else can do it but him. Because yes, it's tied directly to Miss Casey. It's tied directly to
Yeah.
Gemma, his wife, and
And
maybe
there's scary numbers and less scary numbers. Yeah, let's focus on some different ones. Yeah.
There's some kind of innate connection there where
Mm.
only Mark has that emotional connection to Gemma, so only he is able to refine her and basically refine her personality, refine her consciousness to 100%. That
Okay.
has been a big topic that's been going around lately, and I like it.
Okay.
I think it fits. I think it fits in multiple ways. It could
Yeah.
potentially at least explain why it has to be Mark that does Cold
Yeah.
Fire, and why they can't just swap out anybody.
And you think the other guys are working on different ones then? Different people?
That's what I
kind?
wondered as well. That the other three are just working on other random files in hopes
Mhm.
of just creating a better blueprint on how to map this consciousness or whatever they're doing to these consciousnesses to kind of swap them over from one to another. But it seems like Mark is so special, and why Mark was the only one that they didn't fire. Essentially, they had no problem getting rid of Dylan,
Mm.
Irving, and Helly at the beginning of season 2 because of what they did at the end of season 1. And I get the feeling that's because they weren't working on any files that they had a personal connection to. I feel like what they have with Mark and Gemma is something that Lumen doesn't have ever, that often, where they have a refiner and a refinee subject that are married to each other and that have that connection to one another. So I think that's why they value Mark and Gemma so much.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah, I would definitely be, I wouldn't vote against that as a possibility.
It's a good theory, I think. I think it's, in terms of all the theories that I've heard up until this point, as to why Mark is so important, I like that one the best.
Yeah. I mean, it fits because that was one of the huge questions. Why Mark? Why does he have this power where he can literally almost dictate to the board what his requests, and have them,
and have them straight up listen. That's right. I totally forgot about that. Right at the beginning of the season, he straight up tells the board, "I need my team back," and boom, the next day he has his team. So that's a good point. He's able to dictate even to the Lumen board what he wants. That's how important Cold Harbor is. That's how important this connection between Mark and Miss Casey and this Cold Harbor file is to them, I think.
Yep.
And it might hopefully we'll find out what it is.
Yeah, and
hopefully we'll find out.
Yeah, and following on to what you're saying, like if they are the first pair that they have that are like that, because I mean, clearly with MDR, maybe all the other workers in all the other Lumen places are refining to an extent, maybe like refining, because like maybe they have these people that are not quite complete, and that's what refining is like refining certain aspects of their personality, or in like essentially installing it more, almost if not refining might just be the wrong word. It might be reconstructing. And you know how happy they are to use the wrong word for something similar, but not quite the same.
Yep, definitely.
But yeah, that might be, these two might be a unique pair where they do have access to all of these memories, and it might be a more potent version of refining or whatever it is. Interesting.
Yes, that having that maybe having that personal connection between refiner and refinee, you it produces a, like you said, a stronger result. It gives them, more definitive data that they need for whatever the next step in their plan is. Because apparently, whatever Mark is working on, this Cold Harbor case file, Lumen seems to think that it's going to be remembered as some of the most important work in human history. Like that's how much stock they've put in this work that he's doing.
Right.
So
And the thing is, that could be, I mean, and for a show that's writing like the way that they are, this is one of those cool situations where they can tell you, yes, that's what we're doing, and it still doesn't tell us what Lumen's doing with it. I mean, they could absolutely confirm that, yes,
that's a good point.
That'll be a small reveal. To us, it would be a huge reveal, but to the show, it'd be an okay reveal. I mean, they get to check the box, but it still doesn't tell us what nefarious schemes Lumen has once they are able to do this. Yeah.
And those are usually the best kind of reveals to reveal, when you get to a season finale, when you get closer to the end of a season and you do want to structure some kind of answer, some kind of reveal for the audience. Because a show like this that is so predicated on mystery, you do want to give the audience something every once in a while. But you also, like you said, you don't want to ruin the entire overarching mystery. So that could be a really good compromise, a really good medium where they reveal what they're doing, but they don't reveal why they're doing it and what they're ultimately going to use it for, still keeping the broader scope intact while giving us a little bit of a bigger piece of the puzzle, essentially. And those are the best mysteries in shows like this. You don't want to reveal too much at once, but you definitely want to give the audience at least something. For sure. Now, this has been coming up in the chat pretty often lately as well, as Gretchen has become a little bit more of a prominent character. Gretchen, of course, being Audie Dillon's wife. And people have been wondering, is Gretchen shady? A lot of people pointed out very early on when we first saw her that she called Milchick by his first name. She called him Seth. And even Audie Dillon had no idea who the hell Seth was. Now, was that just a simple, a simple case of her knowing Milchick's first name because he introduced himself that way? Or is there something else going on there? I have seen a lot of people at least questioning Gretchen, and if there's something that she's hiding, if there's some kind of truth that she's maybe not saying. I don't know. I'm still not quite sure which way I land on Gretchen, whether or not she is just craving this connection with what she perceives to be the idealistic version of her husband in Audie Dillon, or is there something more nefarious there? Is there something a little bit more beneath the surface that Gretchen was put in Dillon's life for a specific reason and not just out of the kindness of Lumen's heart to give him this great perk? So I'm not quite sure which way I fall on it, to be honest. I don't know if Gretchen is shady or not. I don't know. I guess it's going to be one of those things where I'm going to have to rewatch her scenes a little bit closely and see if I pick up on any other signs. But what about you? Do you think Gretchen is shady, or do you think she's just regular Gretchen?
For me, I guess I'll fall on the side of, I don't think that she is that deep. I mean, I think he probably did introduce himself. Hi, I'm Seth. I'm Seth Milchick. I work for Lumen, or we're working on a plan to motivate the innies, blah, blah, blah. And that's how she knew about that. Now, I do think the falling in love, because she was very uncertain about the whole procedure and everything, and is probably skeezed out by the fact that it's all being recorded, because obviously she's like, who is that child? And the voice from the heavens, Miss Huang. And it's like, wait a minute, what? So she is aware that it's all being monitored, and if not recorded, it's at least being monitored. But I don't think that she expected to actually start liking Audie Dillon. And we kind of saw, and they were doing they showed Audie Dillon as kind of a slob, kind of like, the kid's propped in front of the TV and he's sitting there on his device, and he forgot the cookies that the for the kids' school or whatever, and she's kind of like running the home because Audie Dillon is kind of a screw up. Well, it is definitely a screw up, and they're really making that counterpoint, and they really, they took the counterpoint and double underlined it in this episode. and Dylan's literally saying, maybe he's just trying to find something that he's good at the way I'm good at this. And she's seeing an idealized version of her husband. And it's kind of sad. I mean, I don't think that she expected it, but now that she's seeing it, the kiss was, the kiss for me was the first step. And now and then, we get into the land of, well, emotional cheating isn't physical cheating. Well, that'll be some thin ice to skate on. But I mean, what if any Dylan, I mean, it's almost like every workplace romance or whatever it is. What if any Dylan wasn't any Dylan? What if he was any other person? He was just a charming, nice, positive thinking, go-getter kind of guy, and she's being drawn to that. She's being attracted to that. It gets complicated because he is just a split of the schlub that's sitting on the couch when she gets home. But that's what, this is like a microcosm of every like workplace affair also. But it's in that, nothing in Severance is going to be normal. So they have to put that little spin to it. So, I think that's what we're dealing with here, is just almost like an echo of regular workplace romance, except that now it's complicated because it's the same guy. And we get that, is it really cheating? I mean, if you're kissing your husband, when he's at work, but he has no idea that he has no idea that you're doing it. Dirty.
I don't know. It's tough. It's tough. And that's why this show does kind of raise very interesting questions of things like that, where it is a question, or at the very least a conversation worth having. Is it cheating or is it not cheating? If you're married to the outie, yet you start developing feelings for the innie. Yes, they're the same person. Technically, they share the same body, but it's two different consciousness. Does that make it two different people? It's an interesting conversation to have at the very least.
And the aspects that you're falling in love with are the ones that your outer spouse lacks, which is even worse.
Which is even worse. Which could, and I feel like we saw Fields as well discuss this a little bit in this episode in particular.
Thank you.
Fields,
I wanted to go back to that. Thank you.
Fields, of course, was also, he went through a very similar situation where his husband's innie and Irving's innie did have a romantic entanglement. And I feel like Fields took this incredibly well, like way better than most people would, in terms of how he processed it, how he, his emotional response to it, and how he ultimately views severed people, and how he views severed individuals as two totally different people with two totally different souls, capable of even going to two totally different afterlives, even, where we hear him thinking about the outie going to hell and the innie going to heaven. So this was an interesting concept, because again, it is an interesting kind of idea as to where is that line drawn in terms of, is it cheating or is it not cheating? And Fields kind of looks at it as though the innies and the outies are two different people. And again, it's you can easily make the argument either way in terms of what you believe, if they're the same person or if they are two different people, because they are technically two different consciousnesses at the end of the day.
So I like that. I like that a lot. And they dealt, not only did they breach the topic of how the different religions would have a different take on these things, but innies are individuals with their own soul. So and the other side of it was, Fields is, he is 100% certain he's going to heaven. So, and I don't think it was just bluster. I don't think it was just him like bravado or whatever.
No,
he's
100% like he's not going.
And he felt that, and whatever Bert did when he was a rapscallion in the past, he is absolutely certain that he is not. So, which is again strange. But then they feel like, well, maybe if he does get but then that means that Bert was willing to go through a severance process on the hope that his innie would be able to go to heaven,
make it into heaven. Where his outie wouldn't.
So we're adding that spiritual aspect. Would innie Bert know? I mean, if they are two separate spirits, Would they know each other in heaven even? There's a lot, and this is stuff that we're not going to get an answer to. We're pissing in the wind if we try to figure this stuff out. But it was kind of interesting that they even broach it as something that would be part of a discussion for people who are in that situation. So I super dug that. The innies are individual spirit, like individual souls, individuals with souls, and it's like very, very intriguing. And when we see that, I've seen that, like, I know some people in the chat are going to recoil when you start talking religion, but like they talk about, like, do animals have souls? Well, and the closest one that I've ever heard was like, animals aren't given souls, but if you're in heaven, if you even believe in heaven, that whole thing, but like heaven is your perfect joy. So if you require an animal, if you require your pet to be with you, to have perfect joy, then your animal would be with you. So it's like, they don't necessarily have souls, and then you get in, I mean, we start talking theology and the nature of the soul. What is a soul, if you even believe there is such a soul? And then but guess what, that's one of these things that this show is inspiring you to explore, the same way they're inspiring you to explore what is the nature of personality, what is the nature of self, how do you define, and the severance process strikes directly at the heart of that, right? So these people are living in a world where that whole philosophical, moral, ethical, if you're on the scientific side, you still have to worry about the scientific ethics of doing such things. It's super crazy, and this show invites you to have those discussions,
explore some of those topics.
Which is
a
super
little bit
cool, I think.
deeper.
Wherever you fall on the
because
spectrum of belief.
Yeah, and it is refreshing when shows do take topics like that a little bit more serious, because we have seen other shows that maybe don't take that do kind of dive into some of these waters, and maybe they don't take it as seriously as they could, and sometimes it just doesn't come across in the best light. But that's one thing I do like about Severance. They're not afraid to go into some of the the more realistic, real life topics that people actually go through on a day-to-day basis. But I feel like they do it in a way that is very tactful, that is very mindful of people's experiences and what people might have gone through, people that are watching the show, what they are going to get out of it, what questions they ultimately want us as an audience to ask ourselves and each other. And I think Severance has played it a very, very amicable way up until this point, where they're diving into these topics as respectfully as they can. And I can't say, and I know we've heard some, from other people in the chat saying that they're loving some of the ways that they're portraying some of these topics, which is great. I love that people are seeing it and then they're getting something out of it where they feel like these topics are being respected, because it is
Right.
easy to make mockery of serious of real world topics. Sometimes it's a lot easier to make a joke of things than to really ask the tougher question and the deeper
Right.
aspects, the philosophical aspects behind it. But I feel like Severance does a pretty good job in terms of diving into some of these darker topics sometimes, but they do it in a respectful manner that you do go away from these episodes sometimes wondering or asking yourself questions that you maybe didn't ask yourself going into it. And I feel
Right.
like that is a good show that ultimately does teach you to look at things with a little bit more of a serious light, and it offers you moments of even self-reflection in some of these topics.
Oh my
And they're
gosh,
playing it
yes.
well. They're
Yes.
playing it respectfully.
And I mean, I think that, I have to give Apple TV credit for it. I have to give the writers of gobs of credit for it, because we've seen way too many examples where if the studio doesn't keep the writers in check, the writers use it as a soapbox, and you're going to get character development ripped right out of the front page of today's paper. And I could give two shits about, I watch my shows for the escapism, not to be reminded of, or finger wagged or any of this other stuff about, how I should feel or how I should think, or, what's acceptable and what isn't, and all this other stuff. And they're asking all these good questions. They're presenting it, and these characters are real characters, man. They're people that are asking these
That's the thing.
questions.
They feel like real people. They don't feel like characters on a TV show, and that's one thing I love about Severance. And like you said, credit to the writers, because these characters do feel like real people that have been through real trauma, that have been through real heartbreak, that are actually going through real tough things, current in the current storyline. They don't come off like your average TV characters. They do feel more like people.
Right, right, and Fields was a great character too, and I thought they were going to make him like almost like a caricature because he did seem a little like flamboyant on the surface, but then once he got a couple glasses of wine into him, he went right to brass tacks, and he's like, "Look, there's there's less than non-zero chance that you may have had unprotected sex." So he was very practical,
asking the tough questions. Yes.
Yeah. And they kind of left that too. They left that scene dangling the same way they left Mark frothing on the floor, kind of dangling. So we've got, and especially if they go to the next episode in flashbacks, we're going to be sitting there mulling this over. Like, where do they pick up? We already know they're not super reliable about picking up, leaving you with a cliffhanger and then starting the next episode right there on that scene. So I have no idea where they're gonna. Yeah.
Yell's a little bit of a skip. No, Fields. Fields was a breath of fresh air. I thought this was a very interesting character that they crafted. I'm glad that they recast the role in season 2 in a much more prominent actor like John Noble. And I saw Juan Solar. I saw you in the chat earlier, my friend. Absolutely, I am right there with you. I absolutely loved him in Fringe. He was so good as Walter on Fringe. One of the best roles he's ever played. Many people might know him from Lord of the Rings as well. Of course, he was in that. But when I see John Noble, that's the first role I think of. His role on Fringe as Walter. One of the just most intriguing and interesting characters I've ever seen played. And Fringe, of course, was also one of the writers on Fringe, just happens to be our current creator of From, John Griffin himself. So if you're a From fan, I would probably recommend checking out Fringe if you get a chance, and you'll get to see this man, John Noble, in his absolute prime, best role that I've ever seen him in, and he's been in a lot of roles, but he was good. I must say, he was good. And I like how Dan Erickson describes it as he wanted the audience to go into this dinner, liking Irving and Bert. But he also wanted you to leave this dinner also liking Fields as well. So you as the audience had a tough time rooting for one couple or the other because you like all three involved. And the only way that he was able to do that was to cast a likable actor in the role of Fields that did have that kind of flamboyance, that did have that flair, that did have that likable kind of attitude to him. And especially in the way that he's handling this crazy situation, a situation that could potentially break many different couples and just completely tear them apart. Fields actually is dealing with this in an adult and pragmatic way, where he's looking at it for what it is, where it wasn't my husband Bert that cheated on me. It was his innie, and he does very much view the innies and outies as two separate people. So I thought it was a very interesting way for them to play it. They could have easily just gone with your stereotypical mad Fields character that's just mad at both of them for what they did, but they didn't. They went a little bit deeper. They went a little bit more human. They didn't just that's one thing I love about the show. They stay far away from stereotypes, and I love that. But I mean, I came into this dinner definitely rooting for Irving and Bert just because I feel like they're huge fan favorites on the show. But by the time this dinner was done, I found myself rooting for Fields too, because he is that likable, and they did portray a pretty good role. And again, credit to John Noble, because the guy's just a magician.
Yeah. And the drinking, I think, was that was a pretense for the slip of the tongue about the 20 years. I think that's what that's about. They didn't turn him into a lush or a complete, another, like the alcoholic caricature either. So it was like, it was somebody at a dinner party who had probably one glass too many and then said something off the cuff. And, that was, and all the interactions, though, the dynamic between Fields and Bert, it was so realistic, like a relationship. It's like, okay. And then there's Irving stuck there, kind of like just taking it all in. trying to keep track, of what's going on. And I think, yeah, Irving, we talked about his personality, and whatever his backstory is, there's a level of him that can be present as a dinner guest, but then there's that guy. And I mean, I think sometimes I'm that guy. Other people, when you're just analyzing, you're staying quiet and watching what's going on, and you're picking up the vibe, you're picking up the dynamic, you're picking up all this stuff. And you wouldn't know from doing this show, but there's times when I'm mostly quiet most of the time, but you watch and you can try to figure out what makes people tick. And I think Irving was definitely in that mode at this dinner party. But I did think it was funny he did that little brush with his mustache at the beginning. It kind of called back to Bert spending 2 hours on his hair the first time they were going to meet. So I thought that was cute too.
That's actually a very good callback. That I didn't even think of that when I saw that scene, but that's a good point. Yeah, and it shows the difference between them. We got, you got any Bert spending 2 hours on hair that's practically non-existent, and you got Audi Irving just quick little brush of the mustache, and he's good to go.
But he did peel the price tag off of the wine, right?
He did peel the price tag off the wine, because they did specifically say they like expensive red wine. So that is true. That is very true. But yeah, no, it was a good dinner scene. It was a good dinner scene. Like I think what Dan Erickson was trying to accomplish in this scene, when he talks about it in the behind the episode, in the inside the episode featurette, that was his takeaway, that he wanted people to go into it rooting for Bert and Irving, but he also wanted people to leave this dinner also rooting for Fields. And I think he accomplished that. I think they accomplished that with this dinner scene. And I think with the character that they're crafting around this Fields character, they did. They made him very likable. It wasn't one of those aspects where you go in and you leave this dinner just hoping that Bert and Irving are going to get back together. Now you feel for Fields. Now you actually want Fields to have a good outcome as well, because he is a likable character now. So again, very well played by the Severance crew, the writers, the performance from John Noble, all of it. Very, very, very well played. But of course, while the dinner is going on, we have Mr. Frolic himself, Mr. Drummond of Lumon, breaking into Irving's house and finding all of the intelligence that Irving has been gathering on Lumon and on the Severed program for Lord knows how long. And a lot of people have been very suspicious of Bert ever since this episode, and are thinking that maybe Bert deliberately set Irving up just to get him out of the house so Drummond would have enough time to search it. Which again, it's just seeing Drummond break into Irving's house during the dinner, that in and of itself alone, just in isolation, I think could be explained. I mean, it could be explained as easy as Lumon was surveilling Irving and they knew when he wouldn't be there. But then when you add in the 20-year Lumon comment from Fields on top of this, then it definitely starts to paint Bert in a little bit more of a suspicious light. With him having worked for Lumon for 20 years, and even Irving himself being the one to point out that Severance has only been around for 12 years. Many people think that Bert was around for the beginning of Severance. Some people think that Bert had a hand in creating Severance. And Quan Solar and Xavier both pointed out an interesting possibility. The possibility that, was Bert ever severed to begin with? And I think that's a very interesting question. Now that we're learning a little bit more about Bert, and now that we're learning that he may potentially not be who he says he is, you start to wonder, was Bert put in Irving's path from the very beginning just to simply gather surveillance on Irving and find out who Irving was working with and communicating with in the phone booth, and who he's gathering this intelligence for? And and again, I think I saw Xavier bring it up first, and I know Quan brought it up as well. And it's an interesting question. Is there a possibility that Bert isn't severed? Is there a possibility that there is no innie and outie for Bert, that he was pretending to be severed the entire time just to get close to Irving? And I thought that was an interesting theory. I think it's an interesting concept to think that maybe he wasn't, maybe he wasn't severed. Maybe there isn't an Indian Eddie Bert. Maybe he was just playing the wrong con the whole time.
I tell you, man, I would say there is a non-zero chance that that's possible. Because we already know, I mean, Helly could do it, but we also knew that the Glasgow Protocol was in place before that. So, clearly there were non-severed people going to the severed floor before. So, and again, man, they're so clever about that, just with the timelines. It could be 20 years, 10 years, just throwaway, just kind of, or 12 years, just a throwaway line. Well, okay, yeah, Severance started 12 years ago, but if Bert started 20 years ago, that means he's 8 years in. 8 years in, so he's not a newbie. He's probably, 8 years in the military. I think you're probably a major by that point. If you went officer, so you're not a nobody, but you're also, you're right about the level where like you would be, a non-severed person going to the severed floor, and it doesn't necessarily even mean that Irving was the purpose for it. He could have been working at optics and design for any other, like surveilling any number of people. How many times have we seen, different companies do it in different ways, but we've seen Undercover Boss, where the CEO goes and works as a fry cook and finds out how, like, what the experience of, the experience is. He could be, whether they have embedded surveillance people, Hunt for Red October, there's always a political officer on a nuclear sub, serving absolutely no purpose other than to monitor the allegiance to the party, back in the Soviet subs and stuff. So we've seen multiple examples of such things happening. So I think it's entirely possible. Yeah. I'm joking when I say there's a non-zero chance. It's absolutely possible that he was never severed. I kind of wish that he was. And I wonder though, when during the OTC, how did he respond? Did he respond like he was completely shocked? I'm trying to think back to that. How did Bert respond to seeing Irving at his door?
We didn't really get to see that. All we get to see is Irving
outside?
pounding on. Yeah, all we get to see is Irving pounding on the door, and then he gets switched back over. We never actually get to see Bert's response to it.
Okay. So again, Xavier is saying, when Bert said there was 20 years, he was pre-severance for 8 years. Then he committed atrocities and agreed to be severed and work for additional 12. That's possible, man. That's possible. He was a
possibility. Maybe he was the fixer before Frolic was the fixer. Maybe we need to find out if Bert has an old Frolic tattoo on his hand, and maybe he was the previous Frolic for all we know.
Yeah.
Because I did see somebody else in the chat talking about if Mr. Drummond is Frolic, then who are the other three? I think it was Toothless Paste that brought it up. And that's a big. I love that name, Toothless Paste, such a good name. But no, that's a question I've been wondering myself as well. If Mr. Drummond is the physical embodiment of Frolic, and here we see Mr. Drummond again breaking into Bert's house. Again, we see the Frolic tattoo right on his hand. So if Mr. Drummond is Frolic, then yes, who is Woe, Malice, and Dread? Who are the other three? I imagine we'll probably meet them at some point. Maybe we'll find out who some of these other tempers are, who these other representations of these tempers are, and what role they fill at Lumen, because it seems like Frolic, Mr. Drummond, fills one of those fixer kind of roles. A lot of people refer to him as the kind of fixer, quote unquote, and I could see him potentially playing a role like that. At first, I thought he could potentially be one of 4 board members, that there's only 4 board members in total, each one being a representation of a temper. I could totally see him being that as well. He definitely seems to be very high up on the Lumen food chain.
He's also like the absolute, he's like the opposite of Frolic though. When you see, unless they tattoo the temper that they have the hardest time conquering or whatever, because he is the anti-frolic, though. He is very very dry, very unfun as a guy. It'd be interesting, maybe maybe somebody else had trouble with malice, and maybe they become the embodiment of that, as it's the hardest temper for them to tame, possibly. Maybe. But yeah, I do not get when I see Drummond, I was like, oh, that guy is frolic, I don't get that vibe. It was funny, he went right to the chest and unlocked, to the locked chest. How he knew about that, if they had some other sort of surveillance, or if maybe I'm willing to give them credit, willing to allow it just being cinematic shorthand, kind of like we don't need to see him
searching. That he had already been searching the whole apartment, because it does flash back. Like, we see him enter the apartment, and then we get a scene break to Mark and Helena at the Chinese restaurant when Helena approaches Mark, and then it goes back to Frolic once again after that. So I think we were probably just meant to believe that he's been searching the whole apartment the entire time, and this is him finally finding something, maybe.
Cool. Yeah, I'll allow it.
Yeah. Sometimes it's I can suspend my disbelief every once in a while for stuff like this. But yeah, I mean, how did they get onto Irving in the first place? What exactly is Irving doing? Why is he researching Lumon? Why is he researching severed employees? Is he working with a larger group of people? Some people think that both Irving and Ragabi both are working for some kind of rebellion. And again, I get the feeling it wasn't a coincidence that in this very same episode, we also hear Bert drop the name Whole Mind, which we already know the group Whole Mind is a anti-severance activist group. But maybe they're a little bit more than that. Maybe they're a little bit more than just your average activists and protesters. Maybe they are a bigger, more orchestrated and organized organization. And maybe they are actively gathering intel on Lumon to strike some blow against the company. Maybe Lumon got word of that, and now they're trying to counter it.
Yeah, counterterrorism or whatever you call it. I know, like the groups, they have like what the word is, direct action. They have the protesters, they have the people that'll stand around and block roads and stuff. But then you have, and they consider that sometimes direct action. But then you have the people that like set fire to car dealerships and stuff because they don't like cars. That is more like direct action-y. We heard about a lot of that kind of stuff that was a common terminology thrown around in the Summer of Love back in 2020, when things were getting burned down and stuff. That's direct action. I was looking at this list and I was like, man, the geek in me really wanted to dive in there. We found Dylan because there's two Dylan G's, but the Dylan, because one of them was like 58 years old though, so it's not him. But I wanted to almost use like letter frequency, and in a standard, like I guess we would have to use like an American phone book and just guess what letter frequency, because we got, if we had eight A's and then 5 B's, if we could extrapolate how many total people would be on the list. I mean, obviously there'd be fewer Q's, there'd be fewer names that begin with the less frequent alphabetic letters. But I'm wondering how many people we would have on that list if we extrapolated it out and tried to make a guess. I just didn't have Toothless Space brought up another one, and that's another one I didn't explore. The underlined letters in the names. Did you notice that?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't looked any deeper into any of it yet. But there are some underlines. There are some weirdness going on. I don't know what's going on, what exactly he is doing here.
Right. And with as few things, as few pages as we've seen, we're getting an incomplete data set too. So if we're supposed to piece the letters together by, to form words, I don't know that we're going to get too much out of it. Interesting that it's like some of them just have the date, some have the date and year, some have their age. It's almost piecemeal how they're and this is Irving accumulating data points, accumulating bits of knowledge, and I like that too, because you're not always going to have month, day, and year of everybody's details. if he's not on the inside, if he doesn't have access to that data, they're collecting it as they go, and they're like guessing, 16 years old, 6/4, what's that Severance date, 6/14 or 16th, it could have been one of those 2 days. So, interesting. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot there, a lot to dive into in this thing. I just don't know how much of it's going to pay off.
Yeah, how much of it is actual foreshadowing and clues for something that is coming in the future, and how much of it is just scene dressing, really, at the end of the day. It's hard to know. It's hard to know. But no, I want to learn a little bit more about Frolic. I want to learn a little bit more about Drummond. If there are 3 other representations of the other 3 tempers out there, I would love to meet some of them before season 2 ended. And what exactly was their purpose? Why does Lumen have actual human representations of these 4 tempers? We know the 4 tempers are incredibly important to Kier, and they're incredibly important to mapping the human consciousness, because Kier ultimately believed that the human consciousness could be broken down into these 4 different tempers. So it definitely does kind of fit with all of the theories of them potentially mapping consciousness or rewriting consciousness, whether it's what's happening to Miss Casey, her being turned from Gemma to Miss Casey, and what the Severance chip ultimately does. But I want to learn a little bit more about Drummond and the other 3 tempers, and what exactly is their ultimate role going to be. And yeah, again, what is up with Bert? Is Bert sus? Is he just the Bert that we know and love? Or is he potentially maybe really setting Irving up here, or attempting to set Irving up to gain some intelligence on what Irving is really doing? I feel like before this episode, everybody was rooting for Bert and Irving. And after this episode, it seems like, at least in our comment section after my breakdown video, it seems like the majority of comments that are concerning Bert are of people saying that they're suspicious of him now. So Bert has he's cast a big light on himself. If he ain't sus, then boy, he's playing things wrong. Bad time.
Yeah. So it'll be very interesting. Do we have a preview of episode 7, or have they released anything like that yet?
I have one. Yes, I don't have it loaded up to StreamYard, unfortunately, but I did upload a video today that has the episode 7 preview on it. So I will drop a link to that in the chat here if anybody wants to see. It's very limited. The preview for episode 7, there's not much. It's only a few scenes, and every single scene is Gemma and Mark in a flashback. Every single scene.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
and
but if
that's
anybody
really
does want,
yeah, oftentimes that's the most value we get out of those previews, because they don't really tell us much, but it will tell you what scene, who is present and what the background setting is. We'll know if they're inside or outside, that kind of stuff. But yeah, if you're saying that it's all like flashback stuff.
It's all flashback stuff. Every single scene is flashback stuff, except for 2 quick scenes. One of Mark in the MDR office when it looks like Miss Casey kind of appears behind him out of nowhere, which could just be the reintegration, another memory coming through. And there's one other scene of Helly walking down a hallway for a split second. But other than that, every other scene for the episode 7 preview, they're all just Gemma and Mark in some kind of flashback setting to before the accident. So it looks like episode 7, we are finally going to learn a little bit more about Gemma, what happened to her, maybe how she ended up at Lumen, how she ended up severed, how Miss Casey persona came to be. It looks like episode 7 is finally going to give us some flashbacks, and hopefully with it some answers as well.
Nice. Yep. Let off the brakes, step on the gas, and crash us into episode 10, man, for the season finale. But I still think there's a lot to go. I still think, even though we're only going into episode 7, 3 more, and then whatever happens in the finale. But again, man, sky high anticipation, sky high confidence and faith in the writers, how they're handling it. I wouldn't be shocked if they had like a big table with all the board there in an Illuminati type, kind of like a weird twisted Illuminati type format.
Yeah.
for the season finale. I mean, boy, we'll be talking about how do you think they're going to leave us. But if they've charted this out to 4 seasons, we've got a lot of runway to go too. And you know, I've used that analogy many times where a lot of shows ran out of runway. They had too much to put in too short of a time. This show has a lot of room to grow and reveal little things to keep us going. And I honestly, man, and you know, I know you're a From lover. I love the show From, but I think Severance is handling it probably better as far as pacing the episodes and not really leaving us flat. I mean, even my least favorite episode was probably like a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, they're doing good.
They still did, you know, and even the worst one is like putting the chess pieces in place for whatever comes next. So yeah, man, I'm super stoked. I can't wait for Thursday. We'll see what happens, man.
Yeah, should be interesting. Should be an interesting episode as we approach the final 4 episodes in season 2, with the next episode, of course, being Chikai Bardo. And of course, if you want to dive a little bit deeper into how the title might be reflected in the next episode, what Chikai Bardo means, and what the 6 stages of Bardo ultimately represent, and how they pertain to Severance, that is also in my episode 7 preview and predictions breakdown, where I dive into all of the different stages of Bardo and how they will metaphorically relate to Severance and some of our character arcs that we've seen up until this point. Most importantly, Gemma becoming Miss Casey herself. I feel like Gemma becoming Miss Casey is the clearest example of Chikai Bardo that we're seeing on the entire show. And that video dives into all of that, and you can check that one out right here in the chat. But yeah, looks like we got 4 good ones to look forward to, guys. Again, the season finale of season 2 that we are all building towards is titled Cold Harbor. So I get the feeling we will indeed find out what Cold Harbor is this season. Maybe we might not get all of the answers, but I think we'll at the very least find out what Cold Harbor is code for. Maybe we won't find out what they're going to use it for, but I think we'll find out at least the general gist of what it might be if the season finale is titled Cold Harbor, which it is. But I am looking forward to Thursday as well. We got, again, the last 4 episodes, and things are really, really continuing to heat up right now. This is one thing I really do enjoy about Severance. I haven't seen a single episode yet this season that I can call filler. I feel like every single episode has given us something. Every single episode has had some kind of lasting ramifications, or at least has been putting dominoes into place for future storylines. So one thing I love about Severance is they're not wasting their screen time. Sometimes shows do waste a little bit of screen time with a little bit of too much filler. But I feel Severance is making the best possible use of their screen time they can up until this point. And I am looking forward to seeing where episode 7 takes us. What is going on with Chikai Bardo? How is it going to pertain to the episode? What is going to happen between Mark and Gemma? What are we finally going to learn in these flashbacks? I don't know, but I am very much looking forward to it. If Jeremy gets 800 likes on this video, I'll buy a theremin. A theremin. Poor Miss Huang wanted to perform that theremin so much, but Milchick says, you can perform it for me later.
Right.
The theremin is best used in moderation, I believe he said. And yes, there's Miss Cobell as well. We have not seen practically any of Miss Cobell. We do know that she is going to be in some episodes in the rest of the season. Based on the season 2 trailer, we saw quite a few Miss Cobell scenes that we haven't seen in any of the episodes yet. So who knows? Maybe we will finally get a glimpse of Miss Cobell in episode 7 as well. What is a theremin? A theremin is the instrument. It's a device. It's a musical instrument, but the theremin is the musical instrument that mini Milkshake, that Miss Huang was using on the Ortbo, on the outdoor retreat, when she was kind of playing that weird instrument with her hands. That instrument is called a theremin. And It's an interesting one. It's an interesting instrument you don't see utilized very often these days. But it is a pretty cool one.
That would be like, we have to have Miss Huang play an instrument. Let's pick the weirdest possible one. And they went through ocarina, they went through pan flute, and they're like, nah, it's got to be the theremin. And it's so thematic, it fits so well. Yeah,
it's so fitting, man. It really, like, if you're 100% right. If there's one instrument out there in the world that fits with Severance, it's the theremin. It is the theremin, and I feel like it fits so well for the kind of technology that Severance is kind of portraying as well, where it's a mix of very, very advanced technology, also mixed in with stuff that looks like it's straight out of the 70s and 80s. And I love that aesthetic that they have cultivated with their technology. And the theremin just fits perfectly in with the rest of the aesthetic of Severance. So whoever's idea the theremin was, great idea on your part. But there we have it, folks. We are getting closer and closer. We are just a few days away now from episode 7 of Severance. And of course, if you guys want to check out the episode 7 preview and our breakdown of the episode 7 preview, you can check that out right here in the chat, or you can just go to our homepage. It is our most recent uploaded video, and that will give you a little idea as to some of these scenes we can expect to see in episode 7. And again, it looks like it is going to be heavily predicated on some flashbacks of Mark and Gemma before the accident. So hopefully we will finally get some answers as to what really happened to Gemma and how Miss Casey was really created. But until next time, big thank you to each and every one of you for joining us on this fine evening. You can also come and check us out this Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we dive into Severance Episode 7 pregame show. We have a little 1-hour pregame show that we do every Thursday before the new episode airs. So definitely come and join us for that on Thursday. And then, of course, you can check out PM and I every Saturday night right here on the channel as well, diving into the latest episodes of Severance, along with Ravener and I every Tuesday night right here on the channel as well. And as always, stay safe out there, Sevies, in this crazy, crazy world. Keep those tinfoil hats on, folks, and I will see you on the next one.